The fluorescent lights of the gas station parking lot flickered and buzzed in the late October night, casting harsh shadows across the cracked asphalt. Rebecca Walsh stood alone beneath them, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Her waitress uniform still smelled of fryer grease from her evening shift, and her feet throbbed inside her worn sneakers. The hole in the left sole had grown bigger this week. The night air bit at her skin as she unfolded the small collection of bills from her pocket, spreading them across her palm under the sickly light. $8. $8.17 in tips from a 10-hour shift. $8 that stood between her daughter and breakfast tomorrow morning. Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling the weight of mathematics that never worked in her favor. Rent due in 3 days. Electricity bill marked with a final notice. The inhaler her 6-year-old daughter Amy needed for her asthma, sitting behind the pharmacy counter, waiting for $60 she didn't have. She folded the bills carefully, tucking them into her jacket pocket. It would have to be enough. It always had to be. The sound reached her first. A deep, rumbling exhale followed by the clatter of metal hitting pavement. Rebecca turned toward the gas pumps where a massive motorcycle gleamed under the fluorescent canopy. Beside it, a mountain of a man dropped to one knee, clutching his chest. The black leather vest he wore bore patches and insignia she didn't understand, but she recognized the skull emblem emblazoned across the back. Iron Brotherhood. The man's face contorted in pain as he slumped against his bike, gasping for breath. His weathered face had gone gray, the long silver beard trembling with each labored breath. No one else was around except the attendant watching from inside the convenience store. Rebecca hesitated, her hand instinctively tightening around the money in her pocket. The stories about motorcycle clubs weren't kind. Dangerous men, criminals, the kind of people you cross the street to avoid. "Hey," she called out to the attendant. "Call 911, this man needs help." The attendant, a thin man in his 30s with tired eyes, stepped to the doorway, cigarette dangling from his lips. He looked at the fallen biker, then at Rebecca. "Lady, you're crazy," he called back. "That's Iron Brotherhood. You don't want to get involved with those guys. Nothing but trouble." Rebecca looked back at the man on the ground. His breathing had become shallow, his eyes unfocused. She'd seen this before. 20 years ago, her grandmother had collapsed on a city sidewalk, suffering a stroke. People had walked past her, everyone too busy or too afraid to get involved. By the time someone finally called for help, it was too late. Rebecca had been 12 when she got the call, and the memory branded itself into her mind, the preventable death of someone she loved because people chose to look away. She knelt beside the fallen man. Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, pale blue against his ashen face. He tried to speak, but only managed a wheeze. "Heart pills. Forgot." Rebecca reached for her phone. The battery indicator showed 10% and a single bar of service. She dialed 911. Her hands trembling slightly. The call connected, but dropped seconds later. "Damn it!" She stood and ran toward the gas station, pushing through the door. "Call an ambulance right now. He's having a heart attack." The attendant rolled his eyes, but reached for the phone behind the counter. Rebecca scanned the shelves, grabbing a bottle of aspirin and a bottle of water. She rushed to the counter, placing them down. "How much?" $6.50. Rebecca pulled the folded bills from her pocket, her stomach tightening as she handed them over. Amy's breakfast money. The attendant gave her $1.50 in change. She ran back outside, twisting the cap off the aspirin bottle as she knelt again beside the man. In the distance, sirens wailed. Hey, look at me," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I need you to chew these. Can you do that? The man opened his mouth weakly, and she placed 2 tablets on his tongue. Chew them, that's it. Good. He chewed slowly, grimacing. She held the water bottle to his lips, and he swallowed with difficulty. The ambulance is coming. Just stay with me, okay? Stay with me. His large, calloused hand reached up and grasped hers with surprising strength. His blue eyes locked onto her face, as if memorizing her features. What's your name? He wheezed. Rebecca. Rebecca Walsh. Rebecca. He repeated, his voice barely audible. You saved me. Not yet, she said with a small smile. But I'm trying. The sirens grew louder. From around the corner, another motorcycle roared into the parking lot. A younger man, perhaps in his early 40s, jumped off and ran toward them. He wore the same leather vest with the Iron Brotherhood emblem. Sentinel, he shouted, dropping to his knees on the other side of the fallen man. Oh God, Sentinel! He looked at Rebecca with wide, disbelieving eyes. You helped him. Rebecca nodded. He's having a heart attack. I gave him aspirin. The ambulance is almost here. The younger man stared at her like she'd done something impossible. Most people cross the street when they see us coming. Rebecca didn't respond. She just kept her hand on Sentinel's shoulder until the ambulance pulled into the lot and paramedics rushed over with a stretcher. One of them looked at Rebecca. Did you give him aspirin? Yes, 2 tablets, maybe 3 minutes ago. The paramedic nodded. Smart move. You probably just saved his life. They loaded Sentinel onto the stretcher. He reached out and grabbed Rebecca's wrist. One more time, his eyes intense despite his condition. Tell them Sentinel sent you, he whispered. She had no idea what that meant. The younger man stood watching as they loaded Sentinel into the ambulance. When the doors closed, he turned to Rebecca, pulling a business card from inside his vest. My name's Tyler, he said, handing her the card. It was plain white with just a phone number and a small logo, a crown with wings. Sentinel's going to want to thank you. Please call this number tomorrow. Rebecca took the card, studying the strange logo. Who is he? Tyler smiled, but there was something heavy in his expression. Someone important. Someone who doesn't forget kindness. Tyler got back on his motorcycle and followed the ambulance as it pulled away, sirens wailing into the night. The gas station attendant stood in the doorway, arms crossed, shaking his head. You just made a big mistake, lady, he called out. Those guys bring nothing but trouble. Rebecca stood alone in the parking lot with $1.50 in her pocket and a strange business card in her hand. She had no idea what she'd just done or if it had been the right choice. All she knew was that a man needed help, and she couldn't walk away. The walk home felt longer than usual, 2 miles in the dark, with her mind replaying the events at the gas station. Had she made a mistake? The attendant seemed to think so. But what was the alternative? Let a man die on the pavement while she did nothing. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Kindness costs nothing, baby, and sometimes it's all we got to give. Except tonight, kindness had cost exactly $6.50. Amy's breakfast money. By the time she reached her apartment building, it was nearly 1:00 a.m. The complex had seen better days with peeling paint and security lights that hadn't worked in months. Mrs. Hudson, her elderly neighbor who watched Amy when Rebecca worked late, was asleep on the couch with Amy curled up beside her. Rebecca gently woke Mrs. Hudson, thanking her for staying late again. It's no trouble, dear, Mrs. Hudson said as she shuffled toward the door. Amy's a sweet girl, never a bother. Rebecca carefully lifted her sleeping daughter and carried her to the small bedroom they shared. Amy stirred slightly. "Mommy, shh, go back to sleep, baby. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, sweetheart. So much." Rebecca tucked the blanket around her daughter and kissed her forehead. In sleep, Amy looked even more like her father. The same dark curls, the same long eyelashes. 5 years since he'd walked out on them, and sometimes Rebecca still found herself searching for his features in their daughter's face. She walked back to the tiny kitchen and sat at the table, pulling the business card from her pocket. The Crown with Wings logo seemed to shimmer under the dim light. She turned it over. Nothing on the back. Just a phone number. Rebecca stared at the $1.50 sitting on the table. Tomorrow morning, Amy would wake up and ask for breakfast, and Rebecca would have to tell her, what? That they'd have crackers from the back of the cupboard, that Mommy had spent their breakfast money on a stranger. She pulled out her journal, a small notebook with a faded cover. Every night, no matter how exhausted she felt, she wrote down 3 things she was grateful for. Another lesson from her grandmother. She opened to a blank page and wrote 1. Amy is healthy and safe. 2. I helped someone tonight. 3. Tomorrow is a new day. She closed the journal and looked at the business card again. She set it on the nightstand beside her bed. Then she lay down fully clothed, too tired to even change. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but whatever it was, she'd face it. She always did. Rebecca's alarm went off at 5:00 a.m. as it did every day. For a moment, she didn't move her body, aching from the double shift yesterday and too little sleep. Then she remembered Amy needed breakfast, and she had $1.50 to make it happen. She dragged herself to the kitchen and opened the cabinets, taking inventory. 1 banana, slightly overripe. A handful of saltine crackers left in a sleeve. Half a jar of peanut butter, with just enough for 1 serving. She split the banana in half, spread peanut butter on the crackers, and arranged them on a plate like it was a proper meal. She poured a glass of water and set it on the small table. Amy came padding out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes, her dark curls wild from sleep. "Morning, Mommy. What's for breakfast?" "Something special today," Rebecca said with forced cheerfulness. "Peanut butter, banana crackers. Your favorite." Chimmy didn't complain. She never did. She climbed onto her chair and started eating, taking small bites to make it last longer. Rebecca didn't make anything for herself. There wasn't enough. A knock at the door startled her. It was barely 7:00 a.m. Who would be knocking this early? She opened the door to find Mrs. Hudson standing there, arms crossed tightly across her chest, a deep frown creasing her wrinkled face. "Rebecca, baby," Mrs. Hudson said, her voice tight with concern. "We need to talk." "Good morning, Mrs. Hudson. Is everything okay?" Mrs. Hudson stepped closer and lowered her voice. "I heard you helped one of those biker thugs last night. One of those Iron Brotherhood men." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "How did you know about that?" "My nephew works at the hospital. Said a big motorcycle fellow came in last night. Heart attack. Said some young woman saved his life with aspirin from the gas station. When he described you..." Mrs. Hudson shook her head. "Girl, those Iron Brotherhood men are criminals. Drugs, violence, all kinds of trouble." "What were you thinking?" "He was having a heart attack, Mrs. Hudson," Rebecca said quietly. "He needed help. That's all I saw." Mrs. Hudson looked at her with disappointment written across her face. "You're too kind for your own good, Rebecca. That kindness is going to get you hurt one day. Mark my words." She turned and walked back to her apartment, leaving Rebecca standing in the doorway. Rebecca closed the door slowly and leaned against it. Her hands were shaking slightly. Mrs. Hudson had always been good to her and Amy, if even she thought Rebecca had made a mistake. She looked at Amy, still eating her crackers, completely unaware of the conversation that had just happened. "Finish up, baby," Rebecca said, forcing a smile. "Time to get ready for school." At the laundromat where Rebecca worked mornings, she folded clothes on autopilot, her mind still replaying Mrs. Hudson's words and the events of the previous night. Linda, her co-worker, a kind woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, noticed her distraction. She walked over and sat down beside Rebecca during their brief break. "You okay, honey? You look like you didn't sleep a wink." Rebecca hesitated, then told her everything. The gas station, the biker, the heart attack. Using her last $8. Linda's eyes went wide. "You helped an Iron Brotherhood member, girl. You're braver than me." "Or stupider," Rebecca muttered. According to Mrs. Hudson, Linda reached over and squeezed her hand. "You did what your heart told you to do. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that." "But what if she's right? What if I brought trouble into my life? Into Amy's life?" Linda looked her in the eye. "You saved a man's life, Rebecca. That's never the wrong thing to do." Rebecca wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at her mind. During her break, she pulled out the business card Tyler had given her. She stared at the crown with Wings logo, turning it over in her fingers. Finally, she pulled out her phone and typed a text message to the number on the card. "Hi, this is Rebecca Walsh. Tyler gave me this number last night." She hit send before she could change her mind. Within seconds, her phone rang. She stared at the screen, unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, she listened to the message. "Rebecca, it's Tyler from last night. Sentinel wants to meet you today. Can you come to Murphy's Diner on 5th Street at 3:00 p.m.? It's important, please." Rebecca's heart pounded. Linda leaned over. "What did they say?" "They want to meet me this afternoon." "Then go," Linda said, surprising her. "What's the worst that could happen? Free coffee, at least." Rebecca tried to smile, but her stomach was in knots. She was off work at 2:30 p.m. She could make it to the diner by 3:00. But what would people think? What would Mrs. Hudson say if she found out? What if this really was a mistake? As she left the laundromat that afternoon, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. 2 motorcycles parked across the street. 2 men in leather vests watching her. When she looked at them, they nodded respectfully, then rode off. Rebecca stood on the sidewalk, her heart racing. What had she walked into? And more importantly, could she walk back out? The bus ride to 5th Street took 20 minutes. Rebecca spent every second questioning her decision. She should be picking Amy up from school. She should be looking for a 3rd job to cover the rent increase. She should be doing anything except meeting members of a motorcycle club that everyone seemed to fear. Yet something pulled her forward. The memory of Sentinel's face as he gasped for breath. The feel of his hand grasping hers in gratitude. The strange message, "Tell them Sentinel sent you." As the bus turned the corner onto 5th Street, she saw them. Motorcycles. Dozens of them parked in perfect rows outside Murphy's Diner. Chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. Her stomach dropped. The bus stopped. For a moment, Rebecca almost stayed in her seat. But something made her stand and walk toward the diner. Men and women lined the sidewalk, all wearing leather vests with the Iron Brotherhood emblem. Big men with tattoos and gray beards. Women with hard eyes and proud postures. They weren't loud or threatening. They were simply waiting like an honor guard. As Rebecca walked past, each one nodded to her. An older man removed his cap. A woman with silver hair touched her heart with her fist. Rebecca's pulse raced. What did it all mean? She reached the door, took a deep breath, and walked inside. Every booth and table in the diner was filled with members of the Iron Brotherhood. The place fell silent as she entered. Every single person turned to look at her. The weight of their collective gaze made her want to turn and run. Then Tyler appeared from the back, smiling. "Rebecca, thank you for coming. Sentinels waiting." As Tyler led her through the diner, something extraordinary happened. The bikers stood up, one by one. As she passed, they rose to their feet, like a wave moving through the room. Rebecca had no idea what the gesture meant, but it felt solemn, almost sacred. Tyler guided her to a corner booth. There sat Sentinel, looking better than the night before, though still pale. His massive frame seemed to fill the entire booth. Up close, she could see he was older than she'd first thought, perhaps in his late 60s. Deep lines of phi etched his weathered face, and his pale blue eyes held both hardness and warmth. His silver beard had been neatly trimmed since last night. When he saw her, he stood slowly, wincing slightly with the effort. "Rebecca Walsh," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "Please sit." She slid into the booth, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes still watching them. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "The doctor said if you hadn't acted fast, I'd be dead," Sentinel said plainly. "Heart attack. Second one in 5 years. I should have been more careful with my medication." "I'm just glad you're okay." Sentinel studied her face. "Tyler told me everything. You wouldn't take money from him. You've got a daughter, 2 jobs. You used your last $8 to save my life." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't about money." "I know," Sentinel said, leaning forward. "That's why I wanted to meet you." He pulled a photograph from inside his vest and slid it across the table. A younger Sentinel stood beside a woman with kind eyes. Between them was a little girl, maybe 7, with bright blonde hair and a wide smile. "That's my daughter," Sentinel said, his voice softening. "Her name was Elizabeth." Rebecca's throat tightened at the past tense. "Was leukemia," he said, the word heavy with old grief. "She was 7. We couldn't afford the treatments fast enough. By the time we had the money," he trailed off. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said, meaning it. Sentinel's jaw tightened. "After she died, I made a promise. Anyone who shows true kindness, especially when they have nothing to give, I help them. It's what Elizabeth would have wanted." Rebecca didn't know what to say. This wasn't what she'd expected. Sentinel looked her in the eye. "Tomorrow morning, something's going to happen. Don't be scared. Just trust me." "What do you mean?" Sentinel smiled at the expression, transforming his hard face into something gentler. "You'll see." He stood wincing slightly again. He extended his hand, and Rebecca shook it. His massive palm engulfed hers completely. "Thank you for coming, Rebecca Walsh." Sentinel left cash on the table and walked out with Tyler. The other Brotherhood members followed, leaving in small groups until Rebecca sat alone in the diner. An older biker lingered by the door. He looked back at her, his eyes kind beneath his weathered brow. "You did good, miss," he said softly. "Real good." He left before Rebecca could respond. Rebecca rode the bus home with her mind spinning. Who was Sentinel really? What was Elizabeth's legacy? And what did he mean? Something was going to happen tomorrow. As her stop approached, she realized she was late picking up Amy from school. She texted her neighbor's daughter, Jen, who sometimes watched Amy after school, asking if she could keep Amy for another hour. Jen replied that they were already at the apartment making cookies. When Rebecca reached her street, she noticed something strange. People were gathered on porches, talking in hushed voices. When they saw her, they fell silent, watching her walk past with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Mrs. Hudson stood on her porch with Mr. Rodriguez, a stern man in his 40s, who lived 3 doors down and served on the neighborhood association board. "That's her," Mrs. Hudson said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Mixed up with those bikers now." Mr. Rodriguez frowned deeply. "Iron Brotherhood in our neighborhood. We need to do something about this." A young mother holding her toddler overheard and pulled her child closer. "I'm keeping my kids inside tomorrow, just to be safe." Rebecca quickened her pace, her cheeks burning. Word had spread fast. By dinner time, the entire block seemed to know she'd helped an Iron Brotherhood member and had gone to meet them. Everyone was afraid, and they blamed her. Inside her apartment, Amy ran to hug her chocolate chip cookie crumbs on her face. "Mommy, we made cookies with Jen, and she helped me with my math homework." Rebecca hugged her daughter tightly, grateful for the moment of normalcy. "That's wonderful, sweetie. Thank you, Jen." Jen, a college student with blue-tipped hair, smiled. "No problem, Ms. Walsh. Amy's always great." After Jen left, Rebecca made a simple dinner of pasta with the last of the sauce in the fridge. Amy chatted happily about school, unaware of the tension building in the neighborhood. Later, after tucking Amy in, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table with her budget notebook open in front of her. The numbers still didn't add up. Rent was due in 2 days, and she was $150 short. The electricity bill had a final notice. Amy's inhaler needed refilling. Her phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "How did the meeting go? You still alive?" Rebecca replied, "Still alive. Strange meeting. We'll tell you tomorrow." She was about to put her phone away when it buzzed again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. The text read, "This is Sentinel. Thank you for coming today. Please keep your daughter home from school tomorrow. Trust me." Rebecca stared at the message, her heart racing. Keep Amy home from school, why? What was going to happen? She almost texted back to ask, but something stopped her. The memory of those bikers standing as she walked past. The respect in their eyes. The photograph of Elizabeth. Instead, she simply wrote, "Okay." She would call the school in the morning and say Amy wasn't feeling well. One day wouldn't hurt. Rebecca crawled into bed beside her sleeping daughter, pulling her close. Whatever was coming tomorrow, they would face it together. But for the first time in years, she felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. Hope. Rebecca woke to a sound like thunder, deep and rumbling, shaking the windows of her small apartment. Engines. Dozens of them. She jumped from bed and rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain. The sight made her breath catch in her throat. Her street was lined with motorcycles, hundreds of them, chrome gleaming in the morning sun, leather-clad riders standing in formation. The Iron Brotherhood had arrived just as Sentinel had warned. But the scale of it, the sheer number of them, was overwhelming. "Mommy!" Amy stood in the bedroom doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why are there so many motorcycles?" Rebecca swallowed hard. "I don't know, baby. But it's okay. We're okay." She threw on clothes quickly, then helped Amy dress. Outside, she could hear voices rising, doors slamming, people shouting. The neighborhood was in panic. Rebecca took Amy's hand. "Stay close to me, sweetheart. I need to see what's happening." They stepped outside onto their small porch, and Rebecca felt the weight of dozens of eyes turned toward her. Neighbors had gathered in clumps, their faces tight with fear and anger. Parents pulled children inside. Windows slammed shut. Doors locked. Mrs. Hudson stood on her porch across the way, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes? Police. There's a gang on our street. Hundreds of them." Iron Brotherhood. Please hurry. Mr. Rodriguez marched across the street toward Rebecca, his face flushed with anger. Walsh, what have you done? Why are they here? Others joined him, voices rising in a chorus of fear and accusation. You brought a biker gang to our street. Our children live here. What were you thinking? Amy pressed against Rebecca's leg, trembling. Mommy, I'm scared. Rebecca pulled her daughter close, her own hands shaking. It's okay, baby. But she didn't know if it was. Then the sea of bikers parted, and Sentinel walked through his tall figure, commanding immediate attention. Beside him walked Tyler, and behind them came a line of Brotherhood members carrying boxes and bags. The crowd fell silent, watching warily, as Sentinel approached Rebecca's porch. He stopped at the bottom step, looking up at her with those pale blue eyes. Rebecca Walsh, he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet street. Thank you for trusting me. Mr. Rodriguez stepped forward.
Who the hell do you think you are bringing your gang here? We've already called the police.
Sentinel turned to face the crowd of neighbors. His presence alone seemed to push them back a step. My name is Jack Harmon, he said, using his real name for the first time. Most people know me as Sentinel. I'm the founder of Elizabeth's Legacy, a non-profit organization that helps struggling families. Non-profit, someone in the crowd muttered skeptically. 3 nights ago, Jack continued, I was dying of a heart attack at a gas station. Everyone looked away, except Rebecca. She spent her last $8, her daughter's breakfast money, to save my life. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some eyes turning to Rebecca with new consideration. Jack gestured behind him. Elizabeth's Legacy has helped over 3,000 families in the past 20 years. We raise money for medical bills. We build homes. We feed children. From the back of the crowd, an unexpected voice spoke up. Wait, Elizabeth's Legacy. A woman pushed forward Mrs. Patel from 3 blocks over. You paid for my son's heart surgery 2 years ago. I applied through the hospital financial aid program. They said an anonymous donor had covered everything. Another voice joined in. You saved my grandmother's house from foreclosure last year. And another, your organization paid for my brother's cancer treatments. The atmosphere shifted palpably. Fear began to give way to confusion, then to understanding. Mrs. Hudson stepped forward, her hand covering her mouth. Lord, we judged you all wrong. Jack nodded. I understand. You saw the vests, the bikes, the tattoos. You got scared. That's human. He turned back to Rebecca. But this woman didn't see any of that. She just saw a human being who needed help. She used her last $8 to save a stranger's life. He paused. That's the kind of person I want to help. Complete silence fell over the street. Meter. Williams, an elderly black man who'd lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, stepped forward. I judged you by your appearance, not by your heart. I was wrong. I apologize. He extended his hand. Jack shook it firmly. We all make mistakes, sir. One by one, neighbors approached, apologizing, shaking hands, thanking Jack for the work of Elizabeth's Legacy. Mr. Rodriguez walked slowly to Rebecca. I'm sorry I yelled. You were braver than all of us. Rebecca couldn't speak. The events unfolding before her seemed dreamlike, impossible. Jack turned to her. You gave me a second chance at life. Now, let me give you one. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $25,000. Rebecca stared at it, unable to process the amount. For rent, medical bills, whatever you need, Jack said simply. There was more. A letter on official letterhead. Elizabeth's Legacy offers you the position of Community Outreach Coordinator. Salary $52,000 per year. Full benefits, including health insurance for you and your dependents. Start date 2 weeks from today. Rebecca's knees buckled. She dropped to the porch steps, tears streaming down her face. Amy knelt beside her. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "Happy tears, baby," Rebecca managed to say. "Happy tears." The crowd erupted in applause. Some were crying too. Motorcycle engines revved in celebration, a thunderous chorus echoing down the street. Mrs. Hudson pushed through the crowd and pulled Rebecca into a tight hug. "Baby, you showed us all how to be better. I'm so sorry for doubting you." Jack knelt before Rebecca, wincing slightly with the effort. "One more thing." He pulled out a car key. "We bought your car from the impound lot, fully repaired. It's parked around the corner." Rebecca looked up, her face streaked with tears. Why all this?" Jack's eyes glistened. 20 years ago, my daughter died because we didn't have enough money for treatment. I swore I'd never let that happen to another family. You saved my life with your last dollars. Didn't hesitate. Didn't ask for anything in return." He paused. "That's the kind of person the world needs. That's who I need to help run Elizabeth's legacy." "I'm nobody special," Rebecca whispered. "You're wrong," Jack said firmly. "You're exactly who we've been looking for." Tyler stepped forward. "There's more. Come see." He led Rebecca, Amy, and the now supportive crowd of neighbors to a large trailer parked at the end of the street. Inside were furniture, a new bed for Amy, groceries, school supplies, clothes, and toys. Rebecca laughed through her tears, overwhelmed by the generosity. "This is too much." "It's not enough," Jack said, "but it's a start." The Iron Brotherhood began unloading the trailer. Neighbors who had been hostile an hour ago now stepped forward to help. Mr. Rodriguez grabbed a box. "Where do you want this, Rebecca?" Mrs. Hudson directed traffic. "Careful with that bed frame." The young mother, who had promised to keep her children inside, now had them helping carry toys. The entire street, the entire community came together, united by the simple act of kindness that had started it all. Jack stood beside Rebecca, watching the transformation with satisfaction. "Tomorrow, we start planning the community center. Right here in this neighborhood." "Community center, Walsh House," Jack said. "Named after you." Rebecca shook her head, still crying. "You can't." "I can," Jack said firmly. "And I am." Amy tugged at Rebecca's hand. "Mommy, they brought me a new bike and books. And look at all these toys." Rebecca looked at her daughter's face, radiant with joy. No fear, no worry. Just pure happiness. And something inside her broke open. For the first time in years, she felt real hope. "Thank you," she whispered to Jack. "You already thanked me," he replied. "You saved my life. You saw me. Not the vest, not the tattoos. Just me, a human being who needed help." He paused. "That's all any of us really want, isn't it? To be seen." By noon, Rebecca's apartment had been transformed. The old sagging couch was gone, replaced by a sturdy new one with soft cushions. The wobbly kitchen table had been exchanged for a solid wooden dining set. Amy's thin mattress had been replaced by a real bed with a frame, fresh sheets, and colorful pillows. Iron Brotherhood members moved furniture while neighbors helped unpack boxes. Mr. Rodriguez assembled Amy's new desk. Mrs. Hudson organized the kitchen cabinets. Amy ran from room to room, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, look, I have a real desk for homework and books." So many books. Rebecca stood in the middle of it all, still stunned by the day's events. Jack sat down on the new couch and patted the spot beside him. Sit. Let's talk about the job. Rebecca sat feeling the softness of the new furniture, another luxury she hadn't been able to afford. I want to explain what we'd need from you, Jack said. I'll do anything, Rebecca replied. I just want to help others the way you've helped me. Jack smiled. We get hundreds of requests every month. Single parents, veterans, families who can't afford medical care for their children. I need someone who understands struggle, who can look beyond appearances and see the person behind the application. That's me, Rebecca said with certainty. I've lived it. I know, Jack nodded. That's why you're hired. He pulled out a folder with blueprints inside. But there's more. I want to open a community center right here in this neighborhood. Rebecca's eyes widened as she looked at the drawings. The plans showed a large building with multiple rooms, a medical clinic, a food bank, job, training facilities, and an after-school program. Here, in this neighborhood, why not? This is where people need it most. Jack pointed to the top of the blueprint. 2 words stood out. Walsh House. We're naming it after you, he said simply. Rebecca shook her head. You can't do that. I didn't do anything special. Jack looked her in the eye. You saved my life with your last $8. That's the definition of special. Tears filled Rebecca's eyes again. She seemed unable to stop crying today. Your job is to find people who need help, Jack continued. You'll visit families, review applications, connect them with resources. Everything you went through, all that struggle and pain trying to make ends meet, that's your superpower now. You know exactly what they're going through. Rebecca nodded, wiping her eyes. When do I start? 2 weeks. That gives you time to quit your other jobs and settle in. Jack pulled out a benefits package. Health insurance starts day 1. Covers everything, including Amy's asthma medication. Completely. No co-pays, no deductibles. You'll never have to choose between her inhaler and groceries again. Rebecca broke down sobbing. Jack waited patiently until she could breathe again. There's one more thing, he said. He pulled out a vest. Not a motorcycle club vest, but a volunteer vest for Elizabeth's legacy. The crown with Wings logo was embroidered on the back. You're one of us now, Jack said. Family. Rebecca took the vest with shaking hands. She put it on and looked in the mirror hanging on the wall. She barely recognized herself, but in a good way. Your first job, Jack said. Find someone in this neighborhood who needs help. Use those same instincts that saved me. Rebecca thought for only a moment. Mrs. Patterson, 3 doors down. She's 80, can't afford her heart medication. I've seen her cutting pills in half to make them last. Jack smiled. Then let's go help her. They walked to Mrs. Patterson's apartment together. Rebecca, Jack, and Tyler. Rebecca knocked on the door, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. Mrs. Patterson opened the door slowly, surprise crossing her weathered face at the sight of Rebecca standing with 2 large men in leather vests. Rebecca, dear, what's going on? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Rebecca smiled. Mrs. Patterson, I'd like you to meet some friends. We're here to help. The morning sun streamed through the newly hung curtains in Rebecca's apartment, casting a warm glow across the polished wooden floor that had been hidden beneath threadbare carpet just days ago. Rebecca sat at her new kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands. Real coffee, not the instant kind she'd been rationing for months. So much had changed in so little time. 3 days had passed since the Iron Brotherhood had transformed her life. 3 days of adjusting to a reality that still felt like a dream. The apartment renovated, bills paid, a new job waiting. Amy sleeping in her own bed for the first time in her life, surrounded by books and toys. Yet beneath the gratitude, uncertainty lingered. Rebecca had lived so long with scarcity that abundance felt foreign, almost dangerous. What if it all disappeared as quickly as it had arrived? She glanced at the vest hanging by the door. The Elizabeth's legacy emblem, a crown with wings, caught the morning light. Tomorrow would be her first official day at the foundation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Meeting at 10 a.m. City Council chambers. Wear your vest. Bring Amy if you can. Rebecca frowned. City Council chambers. She texted back, "What's happening?" Jack's reply came immediately. "First step for Walsh House. Need you there." She called the school, arranged for Amy to be excused for the morning, then woke her daughter with gentle nudges. "Special day today, sweetie. No school this morning. We're going to a meeting with Mr. Jack." Amy's eyes lit up. Since the day the Iron Brotherhood had arrived, Amy had been captivated by Jack. The huge man with the silver beard, who brought her books and a bicycle, had quickly become her hero. "Will Tyler be there too?" Amy asked, referring to Jack's right-hand man, who had spent hours assembling her new bedroom furniture, telling her stories about motorcycles and distant places. "Maybe. Now, let's get dressed. This is important." By 9:45, Rebecca and Amy stood on the steps of City Hall, an imposing brick building at the center of town. Rebecca wore her Elizabeth's legacy vest over a simple blouse, feeling both proud and conspicuous. Amy held her hand, dressed in her favorite blue dress, bouncing with excitement. Jack waited for them at the entrance, his large frame somehow looking almost formal despite the leather vest and jeans. His silver beard was neatly trimmed and his eyes held a determined gleam. "Ready?" he asked Rebecca. "For what exactly?" "To change this community," Jack said, his voice low and serious. "Starting today." They entered the council chambers to find the room already crowded. On one side sat at least 30 Iron Brotherhood members, their vests marking them as a unified force. On the other side, Rebecca recognized faces from her neighborhood. Mrs. Hudson, Mr. Williams, and front and center Mr. Rodriguez, with a group of people she didn't know, all in business attire. At the front, behind a raised desk, 5 council members sat with expressions ranging from curiosity to obvious disapproval. The nameplate on the center seat read, "Councilwoman Diana Marshall." Whispers erupted as Rebecca entered with Jack. She felt dozens of eyes tracking her movement. Amy pressed closer to her side, suddenly shy amid the tension in the room. "What is this all about?" Rebecca whispered to Jack as they took seats in the front row. Before he could answer, Councilwoman Marshall called the meeting to order. A stern woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, she surveyed the room with practiced authority. "This emergency session of the City Council has been called to address a petition regarding proposed development in the Oakwood neighborhood," she announced. "Mr. Rodriguez, as the petitioner, you may present your case." Mr. Rodriguez stepped to the podium, straightening his tie. The man who had apologized to Rebecca just days ago now avoided her gaze completely. "Thank you, Councilwoman Marshall," he began, his voice formal and distant. "I represent the Oakwood Neighborhood Association and Westridge Development Corporation. We're here to express our concerns about the sudden presence of the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club in our residential area, and their unauthorized plans to construct a so-called community center." Rebecca's mouth fell open. She looked at Jack, who remained impassive, as if he'd expected this. Rodriguez continued, "While we appreciate charitable works, this proposed facility could significantly impact property values and neighborhood safety. Furthermore, we have our own pending development project for that area, a modern shopping complex that would create jobs and tax revenue." He gestured to the suited men beside him. Westridge Development has already invested considerably in planning and has purchase options on several key properties in the area. Jack leaned close to Rebecca. "Now you understand why rent was suddenly going up all over your neighborhood," he whispered. "They've been pushing people out for months." Councilwoman Marshall nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Now I understand Mr. Jack Harmon wishes to address the council on behalf of Elizabeth's Legacy Foundation." Jack rose, his large frame commanding attention as he walked to the podium. Where Rodriguez had been polished and corporate, Jack was authentically imposing. The council members seemed to sit straighter as he approached. "My name is Jack Harmon." He began, his deep voice filling the room without the need for the microphone. "I founded Elizabeth's Legacy 20 years ago, after my daughter died, because we couldn't afford medical treatment. Since then, we've helped thousands of families across this country." He placed a thick folder on the podium. "These are official architectural plans and permits for Walsh House Community Center. We've already filed them with the City Planning Office, all legal, all proper." Councilwoman Marshall frowned. "These were only submitted yesterday, Mr. Harmon. There's a process for approval that takes 8 weeks normally," Jack interrupted. "But under Municipal Code 5.3.2, projects serving underprivileged communities with full private funding qualify for expedited review. Your own planning director confirmed we meet all requirements." The councilwoman's eyebrows rose, slightly surprised by his knowledge of municipal regulations. Jack continued, "Walsh House will provide free medical care for children, job training for parents, a food bank, after-school programs, and affordable housing assistance, all funded by Elizabeth's Legacy. No cost to the city, no tax dollars required." He turned slightly, gesturing to Rebecca. "And it's named after this woman, Rebecca Walsh, who saved my life last week using the last of her money, though she was struggling to feed her own child. That's the kind of courage and compassion this community should celebrate, not push aside for another strip mall." Rodriguez stood. "With all due respect, this man and his organization appeared in our neighborhood 3 days ago. They have no history here, no connection to this community. Westridge has been working with neighborhood leaders for over a year." "Working to push them out," Jack countered. "Raising rents, declining renewals on leases, creating the very poverty you now claim your development will solve." The room erupted in murmurs. Rebecca noticed Mrs. Hudson nodding vigorously in agreement. Councilwoman Marshall banged her gavel. "Order, please." She looked at Jack. "Mr. Harmon, these are serious allegations." "They're documented facts," Jack replied, pulling more papers from his folder. "These are copies of rent increase notices from throughout the Oakwood neighborhood, all managed by subsidiaries of Westridge, all showing increases of 30 to 50% in the past 6 months. He laid the papers on the council table. "And these are records showing Westridge has donated over $50,000 to re-election campaigns for 3 members of this council in the past 2 years. The chamber fell silent. 2 council members had the grace to look uncomfortable. Councilwoman Marshall's face hardened. "Mir Harmon, regardless of your insinuations, there are proper channels for this kind of dispute." "Which is why I'm here," Jack said calmly. "Following proper channels. Our permits are in order. Our funding is secured. And we're prepared to break ground next week, unless this council can find a legal reason to stop us." He paused. "Though that might be difficult to explain to the State Ethics Commission, given the campaign contributions I just mentioned." The silence in the room turned heavy, charged with tension. Then a voice spoke from the middle of the chamber. "I'd like to speak." All heads turned to see Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman Rebecca had identified as needing help with her heart medication. Jack and Rebecca had visited her the very first day. She stood shakily, leaning on a cane. "Mrs. Patterson," Councilwoman Marshall said, her voice softening. "Of course." The old woman made her way slowly to the front. At 80 years old, she had the dignified bearing of someone who had seen too much to be intimidated by politics. "I've lived in Oakwood for 53 years, she began, her voice thin but clear. "I taught third grade at Oakwood Elementary for 40 of those years. Taught some of you sitting on this council." She looked pointedly at two council members who nodded respectfully. "3 days ago, this young woman," she gestured to Rebecca, "brought Mr. Harmon to my door. I'd been cutting my heart medication in half because Medicare doesn't cover the full cost, and I couldn't afford the difference." She held up a pill bottle. "They paid for a 3-month supply, no questions asked, no forms to fill out. Just human beings helping another human being." Mrs. Patterson turned to face the audience. "Now I hear Westridge wants to tear down our homes for a shopping center we don't need. And Mr. Rodriguez, who last month told me my rent would increase by $300 come January, suddenly represents our neighborhood. Who authorized that?" Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. More whispers filled the room. "I want this community center," Mrs. Patterson continued. "We need it. And if you try to stop it, because of campaign donations or backroom deals, every one of us will remember at the next election." The room erupted in applause from the Iron Brotherhood side and many of the neighborhood residents. Councilwoman Marshall banged her gavel again, but the momentum had clearly shifted. A man in an expensive suit leaned forward to whisper something to Rodriguez, who nodded and returned to the podium. "In light of community feedback," he said stiffly, "Westridge would like to propose a compromise. Perhaps there's a way to incorporate elements of both proposals." "There is no compromise," Jack interrupted, rising again. "Walsh House will be built as planned. Westridge can find another neighborhood to exploit." The suited man whispered again to Rodriguez, more urgently this time. Rebecca watched this exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about a community center. This was about power and money, and who controlled the future of Oakwood. For years, people like her had been pawns in a game they didn't even know was being played. But Jack had changed the rules. Councilwoman Marshall, sensing the shifting political winds, adopted a conciliatory tone. "Perhaps we should table this discussion until next week's regular session, giving both parties time to refine their proposals and the council time to review the permits already submitted." Jack nodded once, collecting his papers. "1 week, but our construction crews arrive Monday." As the session adjourned, people began filing out of the chambers. The suited man approached Jack directly, extending his hand. "Thomas Westridge," he introduced himself. "Impressive show, Mr. Harmon. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, businessman to businessman. I'm sure we can find an arrangement beneficial to all parties." Jack looked at the offered hand, but didn't take it. "There's nothing to discuss, Mr. Westridge. This isn't about business. It's about people." Westridge's polite expression hardened slightly. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Harmon. Even nonprofits need funding." "Not this one," Jack said. "Elizabeth's legacy is fully endowed. We answer to no one." Westridge lowered his hand, his smile now cold. "We'll see." He turned to Rebecca, assessing her with calculating eyes. "Ms. Walsh, I understand congratulations are in order. New job, new apartment renovations. Quite a change of fortune." The implied threat in his tone was unmistakable. "I earned it by doing the right thing," Rebecca replied, surprised by her own confidence. "You should try it sometime." Westridge's expression flickered with annoyance before he controlled it. "This isn't over." Well, he nodded curtly and walked away, Rodriguez and his entourage following in his wake. Once they were gone, Rebecca turned to Jack. "What just happened?" "You just met the real power in this town," Jack said grimly. "Thomas Westridge, third-generation real estate developer, owns half the city council and wants to own your neighborhood next. Why do you care so much about Oakwood? There must be easier places to build a community center." Jack's eyes took on a distant look. 20 years ago, when Elizabeth was sick, we lived in a neighborhood just like Oakwood, working people struggling to get by. When we couldn't afford her treatments, not one hospital would help us. Not one bank would give us a loan. His jaw tightened. After she died, I swore I'd create places where that would never happen again. Rebecca placed her hand on Jack's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Thank you for fighting for us." Jack nodded, then seemed to shake off the past. "Come on. You've got training to do before you start tomorrow. And we've got a community center to build." As they left City Hall, Rebecca noticed a man watching them from across the street. He wore a press badge and scribbled in a small notebook. When he saw her looking, he approached quickly. "Ms. Walsh, Frank Dawson, City Observer. Could I ask you a few questions about your sudden connection to the Iron Brotherhood?" Before Rebecca could respond, Jack stepped between them. "No comment." "Mr. Harmon," Dawson persisted, "there are rumors about Elizabeth's legacy being funded through illegal activities. Care to address those?" Jack's expression darkened. "Those rumors are fabricated by people like Westridge, who don't want us helping communities they're trying to gentrify. You print that accusation, and our lawyers will own your newspaper by Friday." Dawson held up his hands. "Just seeking comment on public concerns, Mr. Harmon. The Brotherhood doesn't exactly have a pristine reputation." "Then maybe you should do some actual journalism instead of repeating gossip," Jack replied. 20 years of charitable work. Thousands of families helped. That's the story, Mr. Dawson. And the lawsuit against you in 1989, is that part of the story too?" Jack went completely still, his eyes hardening. "You want that story, really want it. Come to Elizabeth's Legacy headquarters tomorrow. I'll give you the full tour. Show you exactly where our funding comes from. Introduce you to our board of directors. Give you access to our financial records for the past 2 decades. But you print every word I say, not just what fits your narrative. Deal?" Dawson seemed taken aback by the offer. "Deal," he said after a moment. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Jack turned away, guiding Rebecca and Amy toward the parking lot. "Who is he?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Local muckraker with aspirations for bigger bylines," Jack answered. "Westridge probably put him up to it trying to find dirt." "Will that be a problem?" Jack's expression was unreadable. "Not for us. Might be for him when he discovers there's no dirt to find." He glanced down at Rebecca. "But it means things are going to get more complicated. Westridge doesn't give up easily." 2 days later, Rebecca sat at her new desk in the Elizabeth's Legacy offices, a converted warehouse on the edge of downtown. The space was open and inviting, with exposed brick walls, comfortable furniture, and walls covered with photos of families the organization had helped over the years. Carol, the Iron Brotherhood member who had become Rebecca's mentor, placed another file in front of her. Family of 4. Father lost his job when the factory closed. Mother working part-time as a home health aide. 7-year-old daughter diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. They can't afford the insulin. Rebecca opened the file, scanning the details. In just 2 days, she'd reviewed dozens of similar cases, each one breaking her heart a little more. So many families, one crisis away from disaster, just as she had been. "What can we do for them?" she asked. Carol smiled. "That's for you to decide. You're the outreach coordinator now. What do they need most?" Rebecca considered the case thoughtfully. Immediate medical assistance for the daughter. But that's just a stopgap. The father needs a job with health benefits. She tapped the file. It says here he was a machinist for 15 years. Could we connect him with Sullivan Manufacturing? I remember Jack mentioning they're one of our partner companies. Carol nodded approvingly. Good thinking. Sullivan has excellent health benefits, and they're always looking for experienced machinists. And in the meantime, we cover the insulin costs and provide grocery assistance until he's employed again. Perfect. Draft the assistance plan, and I'll help you implement it this afternoon. As Carol walked away, Rebecca felt a surge of satisfaction unlike anything she'd experienced at her previous jobs. Here she wasn't just surviving. She was helping others survive using her own hard-won knowledge of struggle to identify what families truly needed. The front door chimed, and Rebecca looked up to see Frank Dawson entering. The reporter looked different today, less aggressive, almost subdued. Jack emerged from his office to greet him. "Right on time, Mr. Dawson. Ready for that tour?" "I am." Dawson glanced around the space with professional curiosity. "Though I have to admit this isn't what I expected from an organization run by a motorcycle club." Jack smiled slightly. "Elizabeth's legacy isn't run by the Iron Brotherhood. It's run by me and our board of directors, which includes doctors, lawyers, business leaders, and yes, some Brotherhood members. The Brotherhood provides volunteer support and fundraising." He gestured for Dawson to follow him. "Let me show you how it all works." Rebecca returned to her files but kept an ear tuned to the tour. Jack led Dawson through the facility, explaining their programs, introducing staff members, and showing him their financial documentation. "All of our funding is completely transparent," Jack was saying as they returned to the main area. "Our endowment came from a settlement with Metropolitan Pharmaceutical in 1992. $15 million invested conservatively, generating enough annual income to fund our operations in perpetuity." Rebecca looked up sharply. This was new information to her. "Metropolitan Pharmaceutical," Dawson repeated. "That's connected to the lawsuit I mentioned, isn't it?" Jack's expression remained neutral. "It is. After Elizabeth died, I discovered Metropolitan had deliberately suppressed research about an alternative treatment that could have saved her because it would have competed with their more profitable medication. I sued them, proved they had violated ethical standards, and won." "You were a doctor," Dawson said, not a question, but a statement. "Pediatric oncologist, yes." Rebecca felt her breath catch. Jack had never mentioned this to her. "You lost your license," Dawson continued. "I surrendered it voluntarily," Jack corrected. "After Elizabeth died, I had nothing left to lose. I exposed Metropolitan's practices, testified before Congress, and helped change pharmaceutical testing regulations. Then I took the settlement money and built something that would help families like mine." Dawson was scribbling rapidly in his notebook. "And the Brotherhood. How does a pediatric oncologist end up leading a motorcycle club?" Jack's face softened slightly. "My father was a founding member back in the 1960s. Originally, it was just veterans helping veterans adjust to civilian life. After Elizabeth died and my medical career ended, I was lost. The Brotherhood gave me purpose again, a community. When I started Elizabeth's legacy, they became my most dedicated volunteers." The reporter studied Jack with newfound respect. "That's not the story I expected to write. Most people see the vests and the motorcycles and make assumptions," Jack said. "Just like they see struggling neighborhoods and assume the people there have less value. Both assumptions are wrong. Dawson closed his notebook. I'd like to speak with some of the families you've helped if possible. Rebecca can arrange that, Jack said, gesturing toward her. She's our new community outreach coordinator. As the men approached her desk, Rebecca tried to process what she'd just learned. Jack had been a doctor. He'd lost his daughter, his career everything, and instead of breaking, he'd built something extraordinary from his pain. Ms. Walsh, Dawson greeted her. I understand you're new to the organization. What brought you here? Rebecca met his eyes directly. $8, she said simply. The last $8 I had in the world, which I spent to help a stranger having a heart attack. That stranger turned out to be Jack Harmon, and here I am. Dawson's journalistic detachment slipped genuine interest crossing his face. Would you tell me that story, if you'll tell it honestly? That's my job, Dawson assured her. Rebecca glanced at Jack, who nodded his approval. I'll call Amy's school, she said. She should be part of this too. An hour later, Rebecca had shared her entire story with Dawson, from the night at the gas station through the transformation of her apartment and her new role at Elizabeth's legacy. Amy picked up early from school, added her own perspective, her innocent enthusiasm providing emotional weight to the narrative. One last question, Dawson said as he prepared to leave. Why did you do it? Help Mr. Harmon that night, knowing it might mean no breakfast for your daughter. Rebecca considered the question carefully. When I was 12, my grandmother had a stroke on a busy sidewalk. People walked past her, pretended not to see. By the time someone finally called for help, it was too late. She paused. I promised myself I'd never be the person who looks away. Dawson nodded, then turned to Jack. The article will run this Sunday. I think you'll find it fair. After he left, Jack turned to Rebecca. You handled that well. You never told me you were a doctor, she said quietly. Jack's eyes clouded slightly. It was a lifetime ago. Is that why you helped Mrs. Patterson first, because of her heart medication? He nodded. Some habits never leave you. Before Rebecca could ask more questions, the front door burst open. Tyler rushed in, his face grim. Jack, we've got trouble. Westridge's men are at the Oakwood site. They've put up a chain-link fence around the entire property. Jack's expression hardened. On what grounds? They're claiming ownership based on some purchase option with the current owner. They've got private security guards posted. Jack grabbed his jacket. Call Richard, he said, referring to the foundation's attorney. Tell him to meet us there with the property deeds. Rebecca, you stay here with Amy. No, Rebecca said, firmly standing up. This is about Walsh House. I should be there. Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. Carol, he called to the other room, can Amy stay with you? Of course, Carol replied, coming to take Amy's hand. We'll go through more applications together, won't we, sweetie? Amy nodded eagerly, already comfortable in the Elizabeth's legacy offices. 20 minutes later, Rebecca sat in the passenger seat of Jack's black SUV as they pulled up to the vacant lot that would become Walsh House. A 6-foot chain-link fence now encircled the property, with no trespassing signs posted every few feet. 2 bored-looking security guards stood at what had been the entrance, and a white pickup truck with the Westridge Development logo was parked nearby. Already gathered at the fence were about a dozen Iron Brotherhood members, their motorcycles lined up along the street. Neighbors had begun to gather as well, watching the standoff with concerned expressions. As Jack stepped out of the SUV, the brothers straightened, showing deference to their leader. Rebecca followed, feeling the weight of the situation. This was more than a property dispute. This was Westridge's countermove in a game with real stakes for her community. A man in a Westridge Development polo shirt approached from the pickup truck, smirking slightly. "Mr. Harmon, this is private property now. I'm going to have to ask you and your friends to disperse." Jack ignored him, addressing one of the security guards instead. "Under whose authority have you restricted access to this property?" The guard looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we're just doing our job. Westridge Development has presented documentation showing they have rights to this land." "What documentation?" Jack demanded. "A purchase option signed by the owner, Lawrence Taylor, 6 months ago." Richard, the foundation's attorney, arrived at that moment carrying a leather briefcase. A tall, lean man in his 50s with precise movements, he projected quiet confidence. "That would be interesting," Richard said smoothly, "if Mr. Taylor still owned this property." He removed papers from his briefcase. "Elizabeth's Legacy Foundation completed purchase of this land last month. Here's the deed, properly filed with the county recorder's office. The sale was closed and recorded on September 15th. The Westridge representative snatched the papers, scanning them with growing alarm. "This can't be right. Taylor signed an option with us in April." "An option is not ownership," Richard replied. "Mr. Taylor was free to sell to anyone until that option was exercised, which Westridge never did. You were apparently waiting for property values to decline further before completing the purchase." The representative's face flushed with anger. "This is a legal matter now. We'll let the courts decide." "By all means," Richard said pleasantly. "In the meantime, you're trespassing on Elizabeth's Legacy property. The security guards as well. I suggest you remove this fence immediately, or we'll add destruction of private property to the trespassing charges." The standoff continued for several tense moments. Finally, the Westridge representative spoke into his radio, and the security guards began opening the gate. "This isn't over," he warned Jack. "It is for today," Jack replied evenly. As the Westridge employees began dismantling the fence, neighbors, who had been watching, broke into applause. Rebecca felt a surge of pride. Elizabeth's Legacy wasn't just helping individual families, it was standing up to the systematic exploitation that had kept communities like Oakwood trapped in poverty. Jack turned to the gathered Brotherhood members. "I want rotating security here 24/7 until construction starts Monday. No confrontations, just presence." The bikers nodded immediately, organizing a schedule among themselves. Back in the SUV heading toward the office, Rebecca finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "How did you know to buy that property before Westridge exercised their option?" Jack's mouth curved in a slight smile. "I've been watching Thomas Westridge for years. He uses the same playbook in every neighborhood. Options on key properties, pressure on vulnerable homeowners, political donations to silence opposition. When I heard he had his eye on Oakwood 6 months ago, I started countering his moves behind the scenes. So finding me, helping me, was that part of some grand strategy too?" Jack looked at her sharply. "No, that was fate, pure chance. I forgot my heart medication that night, and you were there." He paused. "But once I met, you learned your story, saw your neighborhood. It confirmed what I already suspected about Westridge's activities in Oakwood." Rebecca nodded, relieved. "What happens now? Westridge will try something else. He's not used to losing." Jack's expression turned grim. "And he fights dirty. We need to be prepared." As if to punctuate his warning, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Amy's school. "Ms. Walsh, please contact the office immediately regarding an incident involving Amy." Rebecca's heart raced as she read the message aloud to Jack. "Change of plans," Jack said, making a sharp U-turn. "School first." They arrived at Oakwood Elementary 15 minutes later. Rebecca rushed into the office, Jack following close behind. The secretary's eyes widened at the sight of Jack's imposing figure, but directed them to the principal's office. Principal Davis, a thin woman with a perpetually worried expression, sat behind her desk. Amy was in a chair opposite her, tear tracks visible on her small face. "Amy," Rebecca rushed to her daughter kneeling beside her chair. "What happened, sweetie?" "Some big kids said mean things," Amy whispered. "About you. About Mr. Jack." Rebecca looked up at Principal Davis, who cleared her throat uncomfortably. "There was an altercation during recess," she explained. "Some fifth-grade boys were teasing Amy about your association with the Iron Brotherhood. When she defended you, one of the boys pushed her." Rebecca's protective instincts flared. "Who pushed my daughter?" "That's not important right now," Principal Davis said quickly. "No one was hurt, and we've addressed the behavior with the other children." "It is important," Rebecca insisted. "I want to know who's teaching their children to bully a 6-year-old. The principal's eyes flicked nervously to Jack, who had remained silent, but whose presence filled the small office. "Miss Walsh, I understand you're upset, but there's something else you should know." She hesitated. "The boy in question is Thomas Westridge's grandson." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't random bullying. This was deliberate intimidation using children as proxies. "I see," Rebecca said coldly. "Furthermore," Principal Davis continued, even more uncomfortably, "Mr. Westridge called personally to express concern about Amy sharing stories at school about motorcycle gangs. He suggested it might be creating a disruptive environment." Jack finally spoke, his voice deceptively calm. "Let me understand this correctly. A grown man instructed his grandson to bully a 6-year-old, then called to complain when she defended herself." Principal Davis paled slightly. "I didn't say—" "You didn't have to," Jack interrupted. "Rebecca, take Amy home. I'd like a moment alone with Principal Davis." Something in his tone made Rebecca nod without argument. She took Amy's hand and led her from the office. In the hallway, Amy looked up at her mother with red-rimmed eyes. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby," Rebecca assured her, kneeling to eye level. "You did nothing wrong. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." "The boy said you were friends with criminals," Amy said, her voice small. "He said they were going to take me away." Rebecca felt a cold anger unlike anything she'd experienced before. "That's not true. Mr. Jack and his friends are good people who help others. No one is taking you anywhere." 10 minutes later, Jack emerged from the principal's office. His face revealed nothing, but Principal Davis appeared visibly shaken as she watched him go. "What did you say to her?" Rebecca asked as they walked to the parking lot. "I explained that if Amy experiences any further harassment, Elizabeth's legacy would fund a lawsuit against the school for failing to provide a safe environment," Jack replied, "and that if Westridge attempted to use his influence in the school system again, we would ensure every parent in the district knew exactly the kind of tactics he employs." "Will that work?" "For now," Jack said. "But this is escalating faster than I expected." He looked down at Amy, his expression softening. "How would you feel about missing a few days of school, Amy? Maybe helping out at the office with your mom instead?" Amy's face brightened. "Really, really," Jack confirmed. "We need a junior outreach coordinator, and you're perfectly qualified." Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand, grateful for Jack's solution, but troubled by the expanding conflict. Westridge was willing to target a child. What would he do next? The answer came sooner than expected. That evening, as Rebecca prepared dinner in their apartment, a knock sounded at the door. Through the peephole, she saw Mrs. Hudson, her elderly neighbor, looking agitated. "Rebecca, you need to see this." Mrs. Hudson said, thrusting a copy of the local newspaper's evening edition into her hands. The headline read, "Iron Brotherhood Charity" or "Criminal Enterprise." Below it was a photo of Jack taken from his younger days, alongside police reports about Iron Brotherhood members arrested for various offenses over the years. The article, bylined by a reporter Rebecca didn't recognize, implied that Elizabeth's legacy was a money laundering operation for the Brotherhood's alleged criminal activities. It quoted anonymous sources claiming that Jack Harmon had lost his medical license for malpractice, resulting in a patient's death. "This is all lies," Rebecca said, her voice shaking with anger. "I know that," Mrs. Hudson replied. "Anyone who's seen what they've done for you for Mrs. Patterson knows that. But Rebecca, honey, this is all over town now." Rebecca grabbed her phone and called Jack. "I've seen it," he said before she could speak. "Richard is already preparing a defamation suit." "How could they print these lies? What about Dawson's article?" "Dawson works for the Observer. This is the Herald Westridge's paper. He owns it." Rebecca felt sick. "Jack, they're saying you killed a patient, that you lost your license for malpractice." There was a long pause. "I didn't kill anyone," Jack said finally. "But there's a grain of truth they're twisting. We need to talk, but not over the phone. I'll send Tyler to bring you and Amy to the clubhouse. Pack overnight bags. It might be safer if you stay with us for a few days." "Safer, Jack, what's happening?" "Westridge is playing his trump card. He's trying to destroy my reputation, the Brotherhood, and Elizabeth's legacy all at once. And he won't stop there." After hanging up, Rebecca moved quickly, packing essentials for herself and Amy. She explained to her confused daughter that they were having a sleepover with Mr. Jack and his friends. 20 minutes later, Tyler arrived on his motorcycle, accompanied by another Brotherhood member driving a car. They loaded the bags into the trunk. "Change of plans," Tyler said tensely. "We're not going to the clubhouse. Jack says to bring you directly to Elizabeth's legacy offices." "Why, what's happening?" Tyler's face was grim. "Someone just tried to burn down the clubhouse. Threw Molotov cocktails through the windows. Everyone's okay, but Jack thinks the offices might be next." Rebecca gasped, clutching Amy closer. "Who would do that?" "Officially, no one knows." Tyler's expression left little doubt about his suspicions. "But Jack isn't taking chances with Walsh House or with you and Amy." As they drove toward the Elizabeth's legacy offices, Rebecca saw smoke rising from the direction of the Brotherhood clubhouse. Police and fire vehicles raced past them, sirens blaring. The conflict had escalated beyond politics and intimidation. Now, it had turned dangerous. At the Elizabeth's legacy offices, they found Jack directing Brotherhood members who were bringing in computers and files from their various locations. The warehouse space was being transformed into a command center. Carol took Amy to a back room that had been hastily converted into a comfortable sleeping area, complete with toys and books to keep her occupied. Jack pulled Rebecca aside. "I'm sorry to uproot you, but it's not safe at your apartment right now." "Because of me, or because of Walsh House?" "Both," Jack admitted. "Westridge is trying to scare us off, discredit us publicly, and if that doesn't work—" He didn't finish the sentence. "The article," Rebecca said, "about you losing your license, is there any truth to it?" Jack's eyes held hers steadily. "Some. I need to show you something." He led her to his office and unlocked a cabinet, removing a thick file. Inside was a medical journal from 1988, opened to an article authored by Dr. Jack Harmon presenting a new treatment protocol for pediatric leukemia. "After Elizabeth was diagnosed, I developed an experimental treatment," Jack explained. "Metropolitan Pharmaceuticals suppressed it because it threatened their profit margins. When Elizabeth died, I continued my research, determined to help other children." He turned the page to reveal clinical trial results. The treatment worked. 87% survival rate in cases like Elizabeth's. But Metropolitan used their influence to block FDA approval. So what happened? Rebecca asked, sensing there was more to the story. Jack's jaw tightened. A boy came to my practice. 10 years old, same form of leukemia Elizabeth had. Metropolitan's approved treatment wasn't working. He was dying. He paused, the memory clearly painful. His parents begged me to try my experimental protocol. I knew it could save him. You used the unapproved treatment, Rebecca guessed. Jack nodded. I did. Against hospital regulations, against FDA rules. The treatment worked initially, but there were complications I hadn't anticipated. The boy died. Rebecca felt her heart sink. So the article was right. No, Jack said firmly. I didn't lose my license for malpractice. I surrendered it voluntarily after the boy's death while I fought Metropolitan in court. I proved that they had deliberately suppressed data about my treatment protocol that could have made it safer. That was the basis for the settlement. He closed the file. Westridge is twisting the story, making it sound like I was a reckless doctor who killed a patient through negligence. The truth is more complicated. Rebecca processed this information slowly. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because the doctor I was back then died with Elizabeth, and that boy, Jack said quietly. The person I am now, Sentinel, the Brotherhood leader, the founder of Elizabeth's legacy, that's who I've been for 20 years. That's who saved lives, built something meaningful from tragedy. Before Rebecca could respond, Tyler burst into the office. Jack, you need to see this. He turned on the television mounted on the wall. The local news was showing live footage of the Brotherhood clubhouse partially damaged by fire. The reporter was mid-sentence. Sources close to the investigation suggest the fire may have been set by Brotherhood members themselves as an insurance scam. This follows allegations published today about the organization's possible criminal activities. Jack's expression turned to stone. They're trying to frame us for the arson. Can they do that? Rebecca asked, appalled. With enough money and influence, they can try. Dagby turned to Tyler. Get everyone here now. Full membership meeting in 30 minutes. As Tyler left to make calls, Jack turned back to Rebecca. I'm sorry you and Amy are caught in this. I never expected Westridge to go this far. Rebecca surprised herself with her response. I'm not sorry. For the first time in my life, I'm part of something that matters. If Westridge wants a fight, then we'll give him one. Jack studied her with newfound respect. You've changed in just a few days. I found my voice, Rebecca said simply. And I'm not going to be silenced now. As Brotherhood members began arriving at the Elizabeth's Legacy offices, the warehouse hummed with tension and purpose. Something was building here, a resistance, a stand against corruption and exploitation. Rebecca Walsh, who a week ago had been an exhausted single mother with $8 to her name, now stood at the center of a gathering storm. The woman who had spent her life struggling to survive was now preparing to fight back. And for the first time, she had an army behind her. Dawn broke over the Elizabeth's Legacy warehouse with streaks of crimson and gold that seemed to mirror the tensions of the previous night. Rebecca stood at the large industrial window, watching the sun climb above the city skyline, a cup of coffee warming her hands. Behind her, 24 Iron Brotherhood members slept on makeshift beds and couches, their motorcycles parked in neat rows outside a protective perimeter around the building. Amy was still asleep in the small office that Jack had converted to a bedroom for them, surrounded by toys and books that Carol had gathered to make the strange situation feel more normal for a 6-year-old. But there was nothing normal about any of this. In just 1 week, Rebecca had gone from an anonymous, struggling single mother to the center of a war between Elizabeth's legacy and the most powerful man in the city. A war that now involved arson, slander, intimidation, and God knew what else to come. Jack appeared beside her, his own coffee in hand, silver beard neatly trimmed despite the chaos. He looked as if he hadn't slept at all. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his gravelly voice soft in the quiet morning. "I should be asking you that," Rebecca replied. "It's your clubhouse that was burned down." Jack shrugged. "Buildings can be rebuilt. The Brotherhood has survived worse." He turned to look at the sleeping members of his motorcycle club. Men and women of all ages bound together by leather vests and loyalty, who had answered his call without hesitation. "Westridge thinks he can frighten us away with fire and lies," Jack continued. "He doesn't understand what we are." "And what are you exactly?" Rebecca asked. The question had been forming in her mind since the night at the gas station, growing more urgent with each revelation about Jack's past. Jack regarded her thoughtfully. 20 years ago, we were just another motorcycle club. Veterans, outcasts, people society had written off. But after Elizabeth died after the lawsuit, I saw a bigger purpose. He sipped his coffee. Iron gives structure. Brotherhood gives strength. Together, they became something powerful enough to change lives. Before Rebecca could respond, the front door opened. Frank Dawson entered looking as if he hadn't slept either. The reporter carried a stack of newspapers under his arm, his face grim but determined. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, handing the top copy to Jack. It was the morning edition of the City Observer Dawson's paper. The headline read, "Elizabeth's Legacy, the Truth Behind the Charity." Below it was a photograph of Jack standing outside the foundation offices, looking dignified and purposeful. Jack scanned the article quickly, his expression softening. "You printed the full interview." "Every word," Dawson confirmed. "Your complete history, the truth about Metropolitan Pharmaceutical, Elizabeth's story, and Rebecca's as well." He gestured to the sleeping Brotherhood members. "I even interviewed a dozen families you've helped over the years. It's the most comprehensive piece I've ever written." Rebecca took the paper, reading paragraphs about her own story, told with compassion and accuracy. The article painted Elizabeth's legacy as exactly what it was: a legitimate charity born from personal tragedy, staffed by dedicated people determined to help those society had forgotten. "This won't stop Westridge," Jack said, though there was appreciation in his voice. "Maybe not," Dawson agreed. "But it gives the public the truth, which is all I can do. The rest is up to them." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. The fire inspector at your clubhouse found evidence of professional accelerants, the kind used in industrial demolition, not the sort of thing amateurs would use for a simple arson." Jack's eyes hardened. "Did you print that too?" Dawson nodded. "Page 3. The police are treating it as a professional hit job, not a random attack or an insurance scam." The implications hung in the air. Westridge hadn't just sent thugs to throw Molotov cocktails. He'd hired professionals with access to specialized equipment. The escalation was dangerous, calculated. "Be careful, Harmon," Dawson warned. "Men like Westridge don't lose gracefully." After Dawson left, Rebecca and Jack called an emergency meeting with the Brotherhood leadership. Tyler Carroll and 5 others gathered around a large table in the conference room, while Amy played quietly in the corner with a puzzle Carroll had found for her. "Westridge will make his next move soon," Jack said without preamble. "The Observer article forces his hand. He can't let the truth stand unchallenged. Tyler leaned forward. The construction equipment for Walsh House arrives tomorrow. We'll need security around the clock. Already arranged, Jack replied. But I'm more concerned about Rebecca and Amy. They're vulnerable targets. Rebecca felt Amy's eyes on her, though the child pretended to focus on her puzzle. Even at 6, she sensed the gravity of the situation. We're not leaving, Rebecca said firmly. This is our fight too now. Jack studied her for a moment, respect evident in his gaze. Then we protect you both. Carol, I want them moved to the safe house in Pine Ridge until this is over. Rebecca started to protest, but Carol's hand on her arm stopped her. It's remote, secure, and comfortable, Carol explained. Amy could have space to play outside without worry, and you'd both be far from Westridge's reach. Rebecca glanced at her daughter, considering. Amy hadn't been able to go to school, couldn't return to their apartment, had spent the night in an office. She deserved better than to be caught in the middle of this conflict. For how long, she asked. Until we break ground on Walsh House and secure the legal permits that Westridge can't overturn, Jack answered. 3 days, maybe 4. What about my job I just started? Your job will be waiting, Jack assured her. Right now, Amy's safety is more important than orientation paperwork. Rebecca nodded reluctantly. Okay, when do we leave? Now, Jack said, checking his watch. The sooner you're safely away, the sooner we can focus on defending the foundation without worrying about you and Amy. Within an hour, Rebecca and Amy were in the back of Carol's SUV headed north toward the mountains. Their few belongings packed hastily, they watched the city recede through the rear window. Amy clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, a gift from Tyler, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Is this an adventure, Mommy? She asked, always trying to find the positive in any situation. Rebecca smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. Yes, baby, a short adventure. And when it's over, we'll have a brand new community center named after us. Carol glanced in the rearview mirror. The safe house is beautiful. Jack bought it years ago as a retreat for families dealing with medical crises, a place where they could escape hospital rooms and treatment schedules for a weekend, just be normal for a little while. Jack thinks of everything, doesn't he? Rebecca mused. He's had 20 years to perfect his mission, Carol replied. After Elizabeth died, he poured everything into creating systems to help families avoid what he went through. The foundation, the brotherhood, the safe houses. It all serves one purpose: making sure no parent loses a child because they can't afford treatment, Rebecca said quietly. Carol nodded. Exactly. The safe house turned out to be a charming cabin, nestled in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. A wraparound porch, stone fireplace, and large windows created an atmosphere of peaceful seclusion. Inside, the space was comfortably furnished with overstuffed chairs, warm lighting, and a fully stocked kitchen. Amy ran from room to room in delight, especially thrilled with the loft bedroom that would be hers, complete with a small bookshelf full of children's books and a window seat overlooking the forest. How long can we stay? She asked, bouncing on the bed. Just a few days, Rebecca answered, until Mr. Jack finishes his important work in the city. Carol carried in the last of their bags. There's a landline for emergencies, but no cell service up here. Perfect isolation. She placed a radio on the kitchen counter. This is our secure channel. I'll check in twice a day. If anything feels wrong, use the landline to call the emergency number by the phone, then use the radio to alert any Brotherhood members in range. The precautions made Rebecca's stomach tighten. Do you really think Westridge would come after us here? No, Carol said honestly. But Jack doesn't believe in taking chances. Not with people he cares about. After Carol left, Rebecca and Amy settled into the strange tranquility of the cabin. The forest around them was alive with birdsong and the whisper of wind through pine needles, so different from the city noise they were accustomed to. That evening, as Rebecca tucked Amy into the loft bed, her daughter asked the question that had clearly been on her mind all day. "Mommy, are we in danger?" Rebecca considered how to answer truthfully without frightening her. "Some people don't want Mr. Jack to build our community center. They're being unkind about it. We're here to stay safe, while Mr. Jack sorts things out." Amy processed this with the direct logic of a child. Is it because they don't like motorcycles? It's because they don't understand that good people can look different than what they expect, Rebecca explained. They see the vests and the motorcycles and make assumptions just like I almost did that night at the gas station. "But you helped Mr. Jack anyway." Rebecca smoothed Amy's hair. "Yes, because my grandmother taught me to see people, not appearances. To help when help is needed." "I'm glad you did," Amy said, her eyes growing heavy with sleep. "Mr. Jack and Tyler and Carol are our friends now." "Yes, they are," Rebecca whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "The best kind of friends. The kind who stand by you when things get hard." As Amy drifted to sleep, Rebecca returned downstairs and sat on the porch, watching darkness envelop the forest. For the first time in days, she had space to think about everything that had happened since that night at the gas station. Her life had been transformed, certainly, but so had she. The woman who had stood in that gas station parking lot with $8 to her name, exhausted and defeated by life, seemed like a stranger now. In her place was someone stronger, someone with purpose, someone who was part of something meaningful. The radio crackled, startling her from her thoughts. "Rebecca!" Jack's voice came through, slightly distorted by static. "Radio check." She picked up the handset. "We're here, safe and sound." "Good. Things are heating up in the city. Westridge held a press conference claiming Elizabeth's legacy is a front for drug distribution. The police are talking about investigating us." Rebecca gasped. "That's ridiculous. Everyone knows the work you do." "Evidence can be manufactured," Jack replied grimly. "Especially when you have money and connections." "What can I do?" "Stay safe. Keep Amy safe. That's all that matters right now." There was a pause. "The construction equipment arrived today. We're breaking ground tomorrow morning, no matter what." "Be careful, Jack." "Always am." The radio went silent. Rebecca slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with fire and shadows. She woke before dawn, moving quietly through the cabin to avoid waking Amy. She made coffee and stepped onto the porch just as the first light began to filter through the trees. The radio crackled again around noon. This time it was Tyler, his voice tight with tension. "Rebecca, everything okay there?" "We're fine. Amy's building a fort from sofa cushions. What's happening there?" "Police raided the foundation offices this morning. Claimed they had an anonymous tip about drugs hidden in the building." Rebecca's heart sank. "Did they find anything?" "Nothing, because there was nothing to find. But they tore the place apart, confiscated our computers, our files, everything about the families we helped, their medical records, financial information, all seized as evidence." "That's terrible. What about the construction site?" "That's where Jack is now. We broke ground at dawn, got the excavation started before they could stop us. The police tried to shut it down with some bogus permit violation, but our lawyer was ready with all the documentation. They couldn't do anything." Rebecca felt a surge of pride. "So Walsh House is actually happening. Foundation trenches are being dug as we speak," Tyler confirmed. "But Westridge isn't done. The raid was just his opening move." What's next? Jack thinks he'll target individual Brotherhood members. Criminal charges, old warrants, anything to diminish our numbers and break morale. Rebecca thought of the men and women who had slept on the warehouse floor, ready to protect Jack's mission. People with lives, families, jobs, now all at risk. "This isn't right," she said. "There has to be something we can do to stop Westridge." "Jack's working on it. He says to tell Amy he misses her puzzle skills." There was affection in Tyler's voice. The next morning, the radio remained silent. Rebecca tried calling several times but received no response. The isolation that had felt peaceful now became oppressive, filled with worry. By evening, she was pacing the cabin, checking the radio every few minutes. Amy sensed her mother's anxiety and grew quiet, her fort abandoned. "Why won't Mr. Jack answer?" she asked finally. "I don't know, sweetie. Maybe the radio isn't working." As if in response, the device crackled to life. But the voice that came through wasn't Jack's or Tyler's. "Rebecca Walsh," a woman's voice unfamiliar. "This is Sarah from Pine Branch Outpost. Jack asked me to check on you." Rebecca grabbed the radio. "Where's Jack?" "What's happening?" "There was an incident at the construction site," Sarah replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Jack asked me to come to the cabin. I'll be there in 30 minutes to brief you." "What kind of incident? Is Jack okay?" 30 minutes. Over and out." The radio went silent, leaving Rebecca with a growing sense of dread. She gathered Amy close, trying to appear calm for her daughter's sake, while her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. 28 minutes later, the sound of a motorcycle approaching broke the evening quiet. Rebecca positioned Amy in the loft with a book instructing her to stay put, then went to the porch, the emergency number ready by the phone inside. A single rider approached a woman on a black motorcycle. She wore the Iron Brotherhood vest with a patch identifying her as Road Captain. She parked and removed her helmet, revealing a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and weathered features. "Sarah," she introduced herself simply. "May I come in?" "Inside the cabin." Sarah accepted the coffee Rebecca offered, her face grave. "There was a confrontation at the construction site yesterday afternoon. Thomas Westridge showed up personally with private security and a court order to halt construction." "Could he do that?" "The order was based on falsified environmental impact statements. Our lawyer was already working to overturn it, but Westridge wasn't waiting. He brought bulldozers to fill in the foundation trenches." Rebecca gasped. "What did Jack do?" "What you'd expect. He and 30 Brotherhood members formed a human chain to block the bulldozers. One of Westridge's security guards got physical. There was a scuffle." Sarah paused. "Jack was arrested for assault." The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. "Assault Jack wouldn't—" "It was self-defense," Sarah interrupted. "But with Westridge's influence, that doesn't matter. They took Jack to county lockup. Tyler and our lawyer are trying to arrange bail, but the judge keeps finding reasons to delay the hearing." Rebecca sank into a chair, her mind racing. "So they've got Jack behind bars, the foundation offices ransacked, and Walsh House construction halted. Westridge is winning." "That's what he thinks," Sarah agreed. "But he doesn't understand the Brotherhood. With Jack arrested, Tyler assumes command. With Tyler coordinating, we've activated every chapter within 500 miles. 200 Brotherhood members arrived in the city today. 200 more will be there by morning." Rebecca's eyes widened. "An army." "A family," Sarah corrected. "Coming together to protect one of our own." She leaned forward. "But that's not why I'm here. Jack sent a message for you before they took his phone. He said, Tell Rebecca to check the second drawer in the desk. The solution is there. Rebecca moved immediately to the small desk in the corner of the living room. The second drawer contained a leather-bound ledger, old and worn. Opening it, she found page after page of handwritten notes, newspaper clippings, and photographs, all focused on Thomas Westridge and his business dealings stretching back 15 years. "What is this?" she whispered. Sarah looked over her shoulder. "Jack's insurance policy. He's been tracking Westridge for years, documenting everything. The questionable land deals, the environmental violations, the political bribes thinly disguised as campaign contributions." Rebecca flipped through the pages with growing astonishment. "This is comprehensive." "Jack doesn't do anything halfway," Sarah said. "He knew someday Westridge would come after Elizabeth's legacy. He prepared." The last section of the ledger contained something even more damning. Financial records showing Westridge Development had been systematically defrauding investors and the city by inflating costs on public projects and pocketing the difference. "This is criminal activity," Rebecca said. "Why hasn't Jack used this information before?" "Because using it means war," Sarah replied grimly. "Total war, no turning back." Jack preferred to operate under Westridge's radar, helping families one by one without drawing his full attention. But now Westridge has forced his hand. Jack's message is clear. He wants you to take this information to Frank Dawson at the Observer. Rebecca closed the ledger slowly. "If I do that, what happens to Jack? Won't Westridge retaliate?" "Possibly," Sarah acknowledged. "But with this information, public Westridge will be fighting for his own survival. He won't have time to target Jack or the Foundation." Rebecca thought of Amy upstairs, of the life they were building of Walsh House, and all it represented for her community. "I need to get back to the city." "That's why I'm here," Sarah said, standing. "To bring you back, if that's your decision." "It is," Rebecca said firmly. "Amy and I can't hide in the woods while Jack sits in jail for protecting our community center." An hour later, after explaining to Amy that their adventure was ending early, Rebecca found herself on the back of Sarah's motorcycle, arms wrapped tightly around the older woman's waist, the precious ledger secure in a backpack between them. Amy followed in a Brotherhood member's car that had arrived as backup. The night air whipped past as they descended from the mountains toward the city lights glowing on the horizon. Rebecca felt a strange sense of destiny, as if all the paths of her life, all the struggles, all the moments of despair, even the night at the gas station with her last $8 had been leading her to this moment. They arrived at the Observer offices just before midnight. The night editor, surprised by the arrival of a Brotherhood member and a determined young mother, called Frank Dawson immediately. Dawson arrived 20 minutes later, disheveled and curious. His eyes widened when Rebecca placed the ledger on his desk. "Jack Harmon has been gathering this information for 15 years, she explained. "Every corrupt deal, every bribe, every fraud Thomas Westridge has perpetrated." Dawson flipped through the pages, his journalist's instinct recognizing the explosive potential. "This would destroy him," he murmured. "But I'd need to verify everything. Sources, cross-references, independent confirmation." "How long would that take?" Rebecca asked anxiously. "Days, maybe weeks, to do it properly." Sarah stepped forward. "Jack is sitting in a jail cell. The Foundation offices have been ransacked. Walsh House construction has been halted. We don't have weeks." Dawson looked torn, the reporter's commitment to thorough verification warring with the urgency of the situation. "There's another option," he said finally. "The ledger contains enough verifiable information to justify a formal investigation. I have a contact at the state attorney's office, someone who's been looking for an excuse to examine Westridge's dealings for years. I could bring this to him first thing in the morning." "Will that get Jack out of jail?" Rebecca asked. "Not immediately," Dawson admitted, "but it would put Westridge on defense. He couldn't keep pushing his vendetta against the Brotherhood while under investigation himself." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Rebecca nodded her agreement. While Sarah returned to Brotherhood headquarters to brief Tyler, Rebecca and Amy were escorted to a hotel by two Brotherhood members assigned as their security. The room was comfortable but anonymous, a holding pattern until the next phase of their struggle could begin. Rebecca tucked Amy into bed, then sat by the window overlooking the city lights. Somewhere out there, Jack was in a cell. The Foundation offices stood empty. The Walsh House site lay dormant. Yet something had shifted. For the first time since the conflict began, they were taking the offensive rather than merely reacting to Westridge's attacks. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Dawson called to confirm he'd delivered the ledger to his contact at the state attorney's office. The initial response had been promising enough evidence existed to open a preliminary investigation into Westridge Development's business practices. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Rebecca's phone rang around noon. The caller identified himself as Detective Michael Reeves, City Police Department. "Ms. Walsh," he began formally, "I'm investigating the raid on Elizabeth's Legacy Foundation offices." "What about it?" Rebecca asked cautiously. The raid was conducted based on an anonymous tip claiming drugs were hidden on the premises. No drugs were found, but during our search, officers accessed the Foundation's computer system. Rebecca tensed. "Those computers contain private information about families in need." "Yes, they do," Reeves agreed. "And nothing else. No evidence of any criminal activity whatsoever. In fact, what we found was extensive documentation of legitimate charitable work." There was a pause. "Ms. Walsh, I've been a detective for 22 years. I know a setup when I see one." "What are you saying, Detective?" "I'm saying the raid never should have happened. The tip was obviously fabricated, probably by someone with a grudge against the Foundation. And I'm saying the department is opening an internal investigation into who authorized the raid and why." Hope flickered in Rebecca's chest. "Does this help Jack Harmon's case?" "Potentially," Reeves replied. "If the raid was improper, and if we determine there was coordination between Westridge's security team and certain elements of the police department, it changes the context of the confrontation at the construction site." After the call ended, Rebecca immediately contacted Sarah with the news. The Brotherhood network activated instantly, relaying the information to their lawyer, who was still working to secure Jack's release. By mid-afternoon, the city was buzzing with activity. Brotherhood members maintained a continuous presence outside the jail, where Jack was held a silent show of solidarity. Others patrolled the Walsh House construction site, preventing any further attempts to sabotage the project. Frank Dawson called again, his voice animated with journalistic excitement. "The state attorney's office just issued subpoenas for Westridge Development's financial records," he reported. "My contact says the ledger provided the framework they needed to justify a full investigation." "How long will the investigation take?" Rebecca asked. "Months, probably. But that's not the important part. The important part is that Westridge's political allies are already distancing themselves. No one wants to be associated with a company under state investigation." "Including the police department," Rebecca added, telling him about Detective Reeves's call. "Exactly," Dawson agreed. "The entire power structure that Westridge relied on is crumbling. He pushed too hard, made too many enemies at once." By evening, the momentum had shifted decisively. The judge who had been delaying Jack's bail hearing suddenly found time on his docket. Bail was set and immediately posted by the Brotherhood's legal fund. Rebecca waited outside the county jail with Tyler and a dozen other Brotherhood members. The night air was cool, but she barely noticed her attention fixed on the illuminated doorway where Jack would appear. When he finally emerged, Rebecca was struck by how unchanged he seemed. 3 days in jail had not diminished his presence, his dignity. If anything, the ordeal had burnished him like steel tempered by fire. The Brotherhood members formed a respectful corridor, nodding to their leader as he passed. Jack acknowledged them with quiet gratitude, but his eyes sought Rebecca. "You found the ledger," he said when he reached her. "You knew I would," she replied. "You planned for all of this, didn't you? Even my involvement." A small smile creased his weathered face. "I planned for Westridge. Meeting you was just good fortune." Tyler stepped forward. "The state attorney's office has opened an investigation. Westridge's political support is evaporating. The police are backing away from their harassment." Jack nodded. "And Walsh House. Construction resumed this morning. The judge threw out Westridge's injunction once the investigation was announced." "Then we've won," Jack said simply. Rebecca wasn't so sure. Westridge still has money and influence. The investigation could take months or years. "True," Jack agreed. "But he no longer has the power to stop us. That's victory enough for now." They moved as a group toward the waiting motorcycles, Jack walking between Rebecca and Tyler. The Brotherhood members formed a protective circle, their unity palpable in the night air. "Where's Amy?" Jack asked as they reached the vehicles. "At the hotel with Carol," Rebecca answered. "She's been worried about you." "Then let's not keep her waiting." The reunion at the hotel suite was emotional. Amy burst into tears at the sight of Jack rushing to hug him with the unguarded affection only a child can express. Jack knelt to her level, his large hand gentle on her small shoulder, as he assured her everything was all right now. Later, after Amy had fallen asleep, the adults gathered in the suite's living area to plan their next moves. "We've weathered the worst of it," Jack said quietly, mindful of the sleeping child in the next room. "Westridge overplayed his hand. The investigation will keep him occupied for months, if not years." "What about Elizabeth's legacy?" Rebecca asked. The foundation offices were ransacked. The computers, the files. "All backed up securely," Jack assured her. "We'll be operational again within days. The families we help won't experience any disruption in services." Tyler leaned forward. "And Walsh House construction is proceeding on schedule. The foundation is being poured tomorrow. We should have the basic structure completed within 6 weeks." Rebecca shook her head in wonder. "A week ago, I had $8 and no hope. Now we're building a community center that will help hundreds of families." "That's what Elizabeth's legacy does," Jack said simply. "It transforms despair into purpose." The next morning, Rebecca stood with Jack and Amy at the Walsh House construction site watching as workers poured the concrete foundation. Brotherhood members maintained a discreet presence around the perimeter, though the threat from Westridge seemed to have receded. Local residents gathered to witness the beginning of something new in their neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson sat in a folding chair near the front, her face alight with satisfaction. Mrs. Hudson distributed coffee to workers and spectators alike. Even Mr. Rodriguez had appeared, though he kept a respectful distance, his expression a mixture of regret and curiosity. Frank Dawson arrived with a photographer documenting the moment for the observer. The paper had become an unexpected ally, its coverage helping to shift public perception of the Iron Brotherhood and Elizabeth's legacy. As the last of the concrete was smoothed, Jack stepped forward and gestured for Rebecca and Amy to join him. He produced 3 small metal objects. "Traditionally, we place something in the foundation," he explained, "a token, a wish for the future." He handed one to Amy, a small butterfly charm. For transformation, he said. To Rebecca, he gave a tiny silver key. For opening doors that seemed locked forever. For himself, he held a small crown with wings, the Elizabeth's legacy emblem. For the promise I made 20 years ago. Together, they pressed the objects into the wet concrete at the corner of the foundation marking the beginning of Walsh House, with symbols of their shared journey. As they stepped back, applause erupted from the gathered crowd. Jack raised his hand for quiet. Walsh House begins today, he announced, his deep voice carrying across the site. Named for a woman who spent her last $8 to save a stranger's life, it will stand as a reminder that compassion knows no boundaries, that help can come from unexpected places, and that every life has value beyond measure. He turned to Rebecca. Would you like to say something? Rebecca hadn't prepared anything, but looking at the faces around her Brotherhood members, neighbors, Amy beaming with pride, she found the words came naturally. A week ago, I stood in a gas station parking lot with a choice. Help a stranger or save the money for my daughter's breakfast. I chose to help, not knowing that choice would change everything. She took Amy's hand. Walsh House will be a place where no parent has to make impossible choices between their child's needs and doing what's right. A place where kindness is the foundation, not just a concrete slab. She looked at Jack. And it will stand as proof that we shouldn't judge others by appearances, that behind a leather vest might beat the most generous heart you'll ever know. The crowd applauded again, and construction workers returned to their tasks. The moment of ceremony complete, the practical work of building continued. Jack, Rebecca, and Amy walked to the edge of the site where they could observe the entire footprint of the future community center. 3 months, Jack estimated, surveying the activity. 3 months until Walsh House opens its doors. And then, Rebecca asked, then we do what we've always done. Help one family at a time. Change one life at a time. He smiled down at Amy. Build a world where no child goes without medical care because their parents can't afford it. And Westridge, Jack shrugged. Justice moves slowly, but it moves. The investigation will follow its course. In the meantime, we continue our work. They stood in companionable silence, watching the construction crew. Brotherhood members mingled with neighbors, the barriers between them dissolving in shared purpose. This was the true victory, not just defeating Westridge's attempts to stop them, but bringing together people who might otherwise never have found common ground. 3 months later, a crowd gathered again at the completed Walsh House. The modern building gleamed in the autumn sunshine, its glass front reflecting the neighborhood it was designed to serve. A ribbon stretched across the entrance, awaiting the ceremonial cutting that would officially open the facility to the community. Rebecca stood with Amy, both dressed for the occasion, as Jack addressed the assembled crowd. City officials, who had been conspicuously absent during the conflict with Westridge, now eagerly positioned themselves for photographs. The investigation into Westridge development had expanded, revealing corruption that touched many aspects of city government. New leadership had emerged cautiously supportive of Elizabeth's legacy's mission. Frank Dawson had followed the story from beginning to end, his reporting raising the Observer's profile and his own. He stood among the journalists covering the opening, nodding respectfully to Rebecca when their eyes met. Iron Brotherhood members lined the perimeter, their vests cleaned and polished for the occasion. They had become a familiar sight in Oakwood over the past months, helping with construction, providing security, and gradually earning the trust of the community they had once frightened. Jack concluded his remarks and turned to Rebecca. Walsh House exists because of your compassion, your courage, and your commitment to this community. Would you and Amy do the honors? He handed them a large pair of ceremonial scissors. Together, mother and daughter cut the ribbon, officially opening the facility that bore their name. Applause erupted as the doors swung wide, revealing the interior of Walsh House, a medical clinic where children would receive care regardless of their parents' ability to pay, classrooms for job training and education, a food bank for families in crisis, meeting spaces for community organizations, all under one roof, all free of charge, all because Rebecca Walsh had spent her last $8 to save a stranger's life. As the crowd moved inside to explore, Jack remained on the steps with Rebecca and Amy. "Elizabeth would be proud," Rebecca said quietly. Jack nodded, emotion visible in his weathered face. Yes, she would. He looked down at Amy, who was practically bouncing with excitement to explore the building named after her family. This is her legacy too now. Rebecca thought of the journey that had brought them to this moment. The night at the gas station, the arrival of the Brotherhood, the conflict with Westridge, the revelation of Jack's past. All of it leading here to this day, this achievement. "What happens now?" she asked, echoing her question from 3 months earlier. Jack smiled. "Now the real work begins." Walsh House is just the first of many. Elizabeth's legacy is expanding to other cities, other neighborhoods where families struggle as you once did. And you want me to help. It wasn't a question, but Jack answered anyway. You understand both sides now, the desperation of needing help and the fulfillment of providing it. That makes you uniquely qualified to guide our expansion. Inside Walsh House, the community that had once feared the Iron Brotherhood now mingled with them freely. Mrs. Patterson chatted with Tyler about the medical clinic where her heart medication would be provided at no cost. Mrs. Hudson led a group of neighbors through the food bank she would help manage. Even Mr. Rodriguez had come around, offering his expertise to the job training program. Amy tugged at Rebecca's hand. "Can we go see my classroom now, Mommy?" The after-school program had been designed with Amy's input, a special space where children could learn and play, while their parents worked or attended classes elsewhere in the building. "Of course, sweetie, let's go." As they moved toward the entrance, Rebecca paused to look back at Jack, still standing on the steps, observing the fruition of 20 years of purpose born from tragedy. "Coming!" she called. Jack nodded, joining them at the threshold of Walsh House. Together they stepped inside, crossing the boundary between what had been and what could be. A doctor who had lost everything and found new purpose. A single mother who had spent her last dollars on a stranger and received a future in return. A child who would grow up knowing that compassion could build bridges between the most unlikely allies. And outside, gleaming in the sunlight, dozens of motorcycles stood in neat rows, silent witnesses to the power of seeing beyond appearances to the heart beneath. Iron Brotherhood and Elizabeth's legacy. Two faces of the same commitment that no one should stand alone in their moment of need, that help can come from the most unexpected sources, and that kindness given freely can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. The story that began with $8 and a choice had become something far greater, a testament to the honor that can exist among strangers when they choose to see each other not as categories or stereotypes, but as human beings worthy of compassion and respect.